that's appropriate given tonight's event. So thank you to the administration for putting that idea in my head. So then we are at the agenda. Who wants to move the amended agenda? Councilor Avery, good. Consistency. All right, all in favor? That's carried unanimously. Then we're going to entertain adoption of the minutes from October 13th, and I forgot to communicate some of the other minutes to our executive assistant, Lana, so I will enter them into the record. There was a motion to come out of closed session and that was made by Councillor Lloyd at 8:25 p.m. and that was carried unanimously. Then there was another motion by Councillor Lloyd to continue the meeting past 8:30 p.m., which is required by our rules and procedures, and that vote was unanimous. Then there was a motion to go back into closed meeting at 8:26 p.m. by Councillor Simpson, and that was carried. And it is noted that our CAO left the closed session meeting at 8:20 p.m. Are there any other errors or omissions, additions, deletions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the minutes as amended. Councillor Chapman makes that motion. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, and then I will turn the floor over to 7.2, and who's going to introduce? Russ Tanner will introduce. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair to mayor and council. So what we're going to do here just for the next little bit is I'm going to turn the time over to Dan Westwood and Jesse Potry with our FWBA Architects. And they're going to take us through a tour of the facility as currently designed. And after that point, I'll speak to the report. And we'll also we have Kyle here to talk a little bit about the budget and some of the wins there. Okay. Go ahead, Jess. Or Dan, go ahead.
We're just there. We're on. We wanted to update council as to what changes have occurred in the design since we last spoke to you in May. Since then, we have made some changes, primarily. They won't. We've seen some changes due to, I guess, we were hoping that the school would get funded in time to go through the design process along with the rec center and tender at the same time. They have provided funding to advance the design to the end of schematic design, as you know. And so we completed schematic design of both the rec center of the school, and they were priced out at that time. However, because the school has not been funded, our cost consultants indicated that we should make adjustments to the costing of the rec center, as we would not enjoy the same economy of scale with regards to the construction dollars. So we have made some adjustments to the design to accommodate those differences. Primarily the changes have been just making the building more efficient so that we did not have to give up any program items that were being designed in from the very beginning. So we have a revised design to show you tonight based on those changes, but you'll see that nothing really has been left out of the program. If anything, some things have been introduced and some areas have been enlarged a little bit, but nonetheless, we're on budget. So go to the first slide. As you know, the Recreation Center is located just adjacent to the wetlands, and that has not changed. What has changed a little bit in terms of the design. What we have is we originally had all the parking located on this west side of the project, and since then we've moved the rec center parking to the south side of the building. We still have a major formal entrance off to the west for both facilities that would lead to the shared gathering space between the two facilities, but we've created more of a significant entrance that's off the south end of the building, and that's why we've moved the parking over there. That way, if this building is built by itself, that all this infrastructure does not have to take place until the school is funded. And there will be a formal workable entrance that will service this facility until the school is developed later on, and that at that time they'll share a more public entrance for that would, like I say, lead to the general gathering space in between the two schools. So if there's a major event that is using both facilities, that would be the entrance. But in terms of the rec center, this south entrance will work quite well. If we can go to the next slide. As mentioned, this is the Learning Commons that shares a space between the existing school and the proposed rec center. That is still in the plan. We have a movable wall that will, or glazed wall that will open up to the Learning Commons. So in the event that you're having a large function that would, using the recreation center, you can use this as a staging area for public, and it will also be a great general space that would share both the gymnasium of the school as well as the gym of the rec center. If both walls were opened up, this would be the common area between the two. And so we have this formal entrance here that we were entering from that west entrance, but we will anticipate that being constructed along the school. That was part of the reductions that we made in terms of cost. But as I mentioned before, we have this entrance here that's coming off the parking lot to the south. And maybe we'll walk through the plan as we go through. So coming through these front doors, we have the outdoor play area just off to the side, and we have the reception desk just located off of this, as well as the administration office. Coming in past that, we have the change rooms to the right. We have two change rooms, as well as the team change rooms. And we also, to the left, we will have...
And Dan, just really quick, just while you're on that point, that change to the south entrance too, also works good with the flow coming into reception and change rooms and the upstairs staircase to the fitness center and the track and elevator. So that change to that south concept was also driven with the flow into the rec center from our perspective, not so much from the common school perspective.
That's right. You'll see, and when I go through the second floor, you have an elevator and stair that leads directly up to the mezzanine level that has the gym area that's accessible right off that main entrance. But coming through this main hall, you'd have the indoor playground area and the associated spaces that support it. We've added a new squash court as part of that area. Continuing down the hall, we have the washroom block for the entire facility. We also have the flex breakout room that can be subdivided, but it is sized to have 120 occupants at this time. Then we still have the future commercial kitchen, but we have the joint mechanical space that will be built with this facility at this time, and the school will be contributing their portion for that future, for their use of that mechanical room in the future as well. At the end of this corridor, we have the servery that will be facilitated by the kitchen in the future, but in the meantime, it'll act as a juice bar and that sort of thing for the rec facility. It's adjacent, this hallway is obviously adjacent to the multi-courts that are here. And then proceeding down, we have the multi-use field. Its size is 180 by 90 feet to the glass boards. That includes the runoff areas. And around it we have, as you can see, the team benches. And just to this end, we've moved the bouldering area just underneath the track that would surround the multi-use field. Next slide. Going up to stairs, as I mentioned, when you come in that south entrance, you have the elevator and the stairway leading up to the fitness area. The fitness area has grown in size, and we have a mezzanine over this area just across the track to accommodate the required extra area. We see this as just being low pony walls between the two areas, railings, that sort of thing, so that there's one crossover point that's accessible to that fitness mezzanine area with people on the track not having to worry about too much traffic going through because it will only be the one crossover point. The track, as I mentioned before, is 200 meters in length on the short side, 215 on the outside, and there are 3 4-foot wide lanes on that track. Next slide. So we've created a video walkthrough of the facility to give you an idea of what the experience will be driving up to the facility from the town to this and the south entrance, and then we will go through the school in the video as well.
I should mention that we changed the cladding or the wall type of the building, and so what you're seeing here is still an early concept of what the exterior will look like.
One of the cost savings that we went through was changing the exterior material to an insulated metal panel system, and it has different characteristics that will provide us some opportunities that we're still exploring at this time. So the exterior is not that developed, as you'll see. So we're just coming up on that south entrance here. You can see the play area on the exterior on the right. And this is the walkway up to the doors leading into the facility. There's the reception on the left-hand side, looking out the glass to the play area. And we've just labeled the spaces on the wall so you can see. So here's the indoor play area to the left. To the right, we have the elevator and the change rooms, the washrooms area, and then finally the flex rooms. Going inside the flex room to give you an idea of the scale of it. This room can be subdivided into 2 smaller rooms. This is walking by the courts now. You can see the glassed area in the distance for the sports field and the track around the second level. And there's the play area in the distance. This is coming from the gathering space back into the rec center, gathering space of the school, looking towards the gym spaces. And here is the sports field with the glazed perimeter. Looking back towards the fitness area, the top. There's the bouldering area. Again, more of a close-up on the play area. This is from looking over the play area from the mezzanine. Now you see the mezzanine of the fitness area, the equipment in. From the second-story windows, you'll be able to see the wetlands from the fitness area. Near the wetlands from the vantage point of the mezzanine. That's our presentation.
First, for any questions, I guess, to the architects, but prior to going into the operational plan.
Okay, Councillor Chapman has a question.
Yep. Thank you so much, Your Worship, and through to the architects tonight or this afternoon. Just 2 quick questions here. You had mentioned regarding economies of scale with the new school. My question would be, what savings to the province would there be if they were to partner up with this project?
Our cost consultants were telling us that we could realize as much as 15% economy of scale. So I guess the savings would be that they would get, in a theory, 15% more building for the same dollar value. The school has a set budget, as does this project, so we're able to build less because of that.
And just to follow to that one, that would be the same economies of scale for us as on the rec facility side too then.
Yeah, so in theory, I guess we're building probably 10 to 15% less of a rec facility than we would be building had the school been coming through at the same time.
Okay. Thank you. My second question, with these drawings and presentation, has there been any advancement of that to Palliser and to the provincial government?
We've been working, as I mentioned earlier, with Palliser to take the design to the end of schematic design, which is the same level as we are showing you tonight or today. And they have been lobbying Alberta Education, indicating that they're ready to roll if they could just receive the funding. But as this time, we have heard nothing further on funding coming through. But they have been, Alberta Education's been very positive about Palliser being at the top of the list for funding of new projects in the south, for sure. And but we haven't seen anything as of yet.
If we build the rec center first and the school doesn't come on for 6 months or a year or something after construction, is there going to be any issues with having to shut down the rec center for a period of time while construction of the school is undertaken, with them kind of being joined together? I'm just wondering if there's going to be any issues there where we might end up having to shut down, or can we work around that?
No, they're being designed such that the construction can occur while the rec center is still being maintained. Even the mechanical system is being designed such that there's redundancy in the systems, so that there shouldn't be any problem in tying the new facility into the existing facility. There would be some issues perhaps with the site development, but because we're entering from the south now, we anticipate that that can all occur just behind fencing, and use of the facility would not be hampered in any way.
Councillor Simpson?
I have a couple of questions too with the building itself. The outdoor play area would be for daycare use, correct?
Correct.
And so can they see the playground from inside the building?
Yes, they can. From the reception area, they can see through those windows to the outdoor play area.
Okay, perfect. And then at the bottom of your drawing with the soccer field, is that bleachers, like 2 sets of bleachers on both sides?
Yes, and we were proposing tip and roll bleachers, and so we're showing more bleachers in this area as well.
Okay.
And so in the event of a major function, more bleachers could be brought in. We have bleachers. Right here are the team benches, but we have bleachers in these areas too. But more bleachers could be brought in for a significant event, and there's also the mezzanine from the track area that could be used for viewing as well.
And there's still a significant walkway through there too, right? Like it won't be overcrowded? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Simpson. So there's 15 feet of space. The dasher boards, the glass boards are pretty much perpendicular right to the edge of the track. So if you can kind of maybe picture the space in track is a similar space underneath there. And then depending on what activity's happening on the multi-sport area, then you also have some ability there. And in large part is why the tip and roll bleachers are generally used quite excessively in space like this. So you have lots of opportunity to move and adjust according.
Okay, is that good for this part? Okay, Russ, you can introduce operational plan then.
So, oh yeah, and I'll give them a a minute here to set up. Yeah, so as I go through this operational plan, we're going to mainly concentrate on the operation of the facility from a draft perspective. We're still working on a number of details that will be adopted into this as we start firming up some partnerships and understanding a little bit more of the use of the space. So here we go. Is there a mouse that I could steal from you? All right. So the purpose of this plan is to provide a comprehensive analysis of the space included in the future multi-use rec center. This plan doesn't detail every aspect of what the center's operations may be, but rather it will highlight activities and programs deemed appropriate for each one of the spaces as we go through here. And so just kind of the vision, just pointing out here that a couple of these come straight from Coaldale's vision and goals off the website that connect with each other through recreation, social, and cultural opportunities, provide quality services and amenities that welcome residents and businesses and visitors. And then I've just added in there, become a community focal point for year-round leisure, recreation, sport, and culture. I think that's kind of a key to keep in mind there. I've even, since being here in Coaldale, have had some community groups outside of the school groups call us and are looking for space to run club basketball and volleyball and things like that, and we just don't have that unique space yet, but we eventually will. So the next slide's going to talk a little bit about the facility and the space within the facility. It's been developed to maximize the community benefit concerning the capital investments, also creating operational efficiencies. The multi-use recreation center currently includes spaces and activities outlined in this chart, and that was shared as part of the package. I'm not going to go through each one specifically, but what we just did a tour through there, and what I do want to point out is there's been conversation, as you're aware, with community sport rec groups and many of the users that we anticipate using this space. Right from soccer, the soccer field is uniquely developed at this point in time for a soccer that the local soccer group has been in contact with Alberta Soccer and understand that they're going to go more towards, they're wanting to go more towards an indoor soccer field similar to what you see in BC and other portions of the country where the dasher boards aren't, it's an actual footprint of an indoor field with out-of-bounds lines. That's been developed here, and the dasher boards have been pushed out slightly. The idea of bringing in the dasher board still is because we're also looking at filling the space outside of our local groups getting on that, and so that we have the capability. And the reality is there's got to be some sort of barrier between different activities of play anyhow, and so that's something that's been looked at. However, we'll talk more in depth about that a little bit later. So that's just one of the examples of what we're talking about with the space. And then it just goes right through to the fitness space and the running track, administrative space, and talks a little bit about the square footages throughout. And later on we'll talk a little bit about how some of this space has been developed with partnerships in mind and leasable space that also will help the cost recovery of the entire facility. So again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the floor plan as you've just gone through for a full tour of it, but certainly we'll point out the floor plans have been prepared by an architectural firm with the input from town council, current and future stakeholders, the sport and recreation working group in the town, and administrative staff. And I know in talking with Dan, we kind of both had commented just the other day that the amount of work that has gone into this facility for a level C budget up to this point is substantially more than you'll usually find at this stage of the game. The turf lines, I already had kind of talked a little bit about that uniqueness, so we'll move through that side of it. But multi-sport court lines and activities, I wanted to point out that certainly having a space that's not competing with soccer during the soccer season and other things is very prudent in offering programs that can actually be offered year-round, meaning that there are multi-sports for basketball, volleyball, badminton, pickleball, that are not competing with the schedule nightly, October especially through February of the soccer program, and there's other groups will pull into that as well. So, and we'll talk a little more about that when we compare to other facilities and where we've seen that not work, and part of the reason why the design is the way it is. There's more than 10,000 square feet for complementary third-party lease opportunities, which is key to the cost recovery. Access and the flow throughout has been adjusted slightly so that that we have a clear flow for people coming in and using different aspects of the facility and together. So I wanted to point out here that the partners with Palliser Health, as you're already aware, the town of Coaldale has a very healthy relationship with the Palliser School Division. We look forward to working with Palliser and Kate Andrews Schools in a collaborative approach to the services we both offer. Together and with other players, we will provide high-quality services that will set us apart from our peers. And I truly believe that statement. I've been to a lot of different facilities and seen what they've done. Many people have done a wonderful job, but you have to build something that's unique and works because in your community, because not every community is exactly the same fabric. Partners, more, and really this is basically, as you've seen case study after case study of pulling in different activities, some communities pulling in libraries to space like this. This is basically what they're pulling from. The more variety of programs, the more connections made, and the more traffic and the capture of future potential customers. It just ends up being the facility gets used more. The more it gets used with the proper business plan, then the more recovery we get for our citizens. So appropriate and attractive bundle servicing opportunities. This is something we're going to work with our partners on too. The more partners you bring to the table, the more opportunities there are to bundle packages and share services. And there's a variety of joint initiatives focused locally and regionally is what we're going to look after here is partnering with the school on things like provincials for football, basketball, badminton, whatever, you name it. And then there's opportunities for shared services, expenses resulting in lower operating costs. So when dealing with some of the third-party groups that come in there and operate their space, no longer have to worry about change rooms and things like that, parking lots. It frees up some opportunity to make some, have some discussion on some of the shared costs that we might be able to help, where they might be able to help us with our costs and vice versa. So, all right. And so this next slide, I'm just going to kind of put these up there. I want to talk just a little bit about the facility use discussion, and just the pricing reflects access to all the town facilities. So what I've done here, and you'll see in just a minute, and we'll work through kind of where I came up with this, is it's nothing new. It's just the angle of that they use for multi-purpose facilities everywhere. Where if you're going swimming and in the same day maybe going and using the track or doing drop-in basketball or soccer, things like that, you've paid a price and you have access to both facilities at the same time. And it also helps with administrative efficiencies when prices are the same throughout. And looking at Coaldale's prices, and I'll get into this a little more in detail in just a few slides, looking at Coaldale's existing prices and understanding that we have 2 years prior to actually implementing the prices that I've used for the operational plan. They're very conservative and they're very doable. They're very, very close to the same. So, but what I wanted to show here within these tables was just that we didn't just pull numbers out. I didn't just pull numbers out of the air. I looked at what other facilities were charging for things, and then we applied them and with specific numbers to certain services and projected them throughout a year to get the revenues you'll see in just a little bit. And this is just showing that this could be a price scale for the future multi-purpose rec facility with some ideas, and when you get up to that family membership, annual membership, it's very common that you would have payment plans and things like that. These are things that we've thought out ahead of time. We've also thought out the idea that there needs to be some corporate opportunities, that if you've bought 10 or more passes at whatever service you decide, then you get certain discounts off. It promotes a few more people using the facility and businesses to use as well. And then just as important to me, and especially from the community I just came from, this was a huge thing. And it still will be here, is the accessibility of the facility is really important. That if you can't afford these rates and things, there are ways to, and recreation fee assistance programs are normal in a lot of communities. And this program is really adopted right back from the city of Calgary and what they do. They didn't reinvent the wheel. There's other social programs out there where if you've obtained them, you can also obtain a recreation fee assistance program very similar to that. And so we've gone ahead and talked a little bit about implementing these types of programs for this facility. Just wanted to make sure that we had a slide on there, making sure that you're aware that I know it's a priority to you, and it's a priority certainly to administration. So, some revenue assumptions. I'm not going to go through all the revenue assumptions, but I certainly wanted to provide an opportunity to kind of see how the math kind of adds up here, and show that we've gone and assumed, like I said earlier, some rates. And then what we've done is applied a daily conservative use to the facility and applied that throughout the year and created a revenue stream there so we could generate an operational plan. And I used the spontaneous use single admissions to facilities because quite oftentimes that becomes kind of your benchmark where you start. And then after that, you do calculations from if you're using the facility more than 3 times within a week, you're probably looking at a month membership. And if you're looking at a month membership and staying within the community, you're looking at, and that's where you kind of work into people's needs. And so I'm just kind of showing this here. We applied this to the memberships. We applied it to rentals, both for user group rentals, which would be our local rentals, to private use rentals, to every service that we provide with a price tag within the plan, which was provided within the package today. All right. The other thing I wanted to point out here is that there's been research done, and so that we could actually see what the proposed rates are, what the rates are currently here in the town of Coaldale, and the difference between that, keeping in mind, again, we're still a couple years away from implementing these rates. And then at the same time, I wanted to show you kind of multi-use rates and fees elsewhere. And the YMCA in Lethbridge is an example, just to kind of show you that right away these are accessible rates and they make a lot of sense, and yet they also are going to tell a really good story for us in just a few slides here. And then we put in a smaller community, of Brooks, and because I've got those numbers and other numbers too. So just some comparables for people to look at. All right, then we had to do some staffing assumptions. If we're talking about expenses, well, your number one resource are your staff, and these staff here, the assumptions are based upon other levels of service that other communities and facilities similar to this one have done, and then taking that and applying it to the space that we've created and understanding that there's going to be a schedule. And so what we've kind of come up with here, first and foremost, is that there are some existing staff as resources that will be repurposed some of their time towards this facility. That's just, it's inevitable that that's going to happen because it's going to be a focal point of the department, of the Community Services and Recreation Department. And so with that, though, in order to refocus some of that time, we've got to bring some staff in to fill some gaps, but also be in the facility. And so the next part of that is new positions, and we've actually applied it to specific positions, just so that they, again, are real numbers, and we have some casual operational hours there, understanding that there's going to be a need, that we'll have our regular hours, but we'll also have our special events and people wanting to go a little bit later there, and then customer service. And so when we apply that, then we get a number of new staffing positions required. All right? So what we do, once we've made all those assumptions, and those assumptions weren't just pulled out of the air, those assumptions have come from research and study from a number of other facilities, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes as well. And there are some comparables. There are some that you have to assume some situations for, because not every facility is exactly the same, but we'll get to that as well. With the expenses we've projected within our plan, though, here is what we're projecting for the expense category is $584,616.80. I can guarantee you that it won't be exactly that number, but it's the best I can do for guessing this point. And so as we go through that, the next step, and actually, you know what? I can't see. Is that previous? Yeah. Something I definitely did want to point out. I don't want to lose the speaking points to the right, but the expenses and projections are estimates based on similar existing facilities, as we've mentioned here. It's consideration of how the future facility will mesh together with existing services and resources within the town of Coaldale have been taken into account as well. And I'd like to note here that some expenses are tied into the generation of revenue. So, for example, pocket vending and equipment for programs and things like that, okay? All right. And then we get to the part we all like, the revenue stream, all right? And revenue projections are tied directly to services offered based on the space being developed. We've talked a little bit about that. You heard Dan mention that. The strategies suggested in the projections within the plan. The delivery of the services strategy needs to be carefully thought out to ensure that we create efficiencies both on the town's end and the user group's end. We believe we're in that sweet spot. It's kind of it's in the report mentioned where we believe we're in that sweet spot where we haven't gone extravagant with the space. We've made sure that space makes sense, but at the same time we can't start shrinking. In fact, it was talked a little bit about there was space that was kind of increased. There were other spaces that were decreased, and one of the strategic things we did is we actually brought some of the fitness space to the inside of the track, because the inside of the track that's cantilevered out over the middle is cheaper space to develop than the exterior envelope of the building, where you're doing the roof and the ceiling and the walls and parapets and all that stuff that adds up. And you'll see within the within the report that there was a $691,131 called it facility reduction we gained back by taking some of that space out off the exterior of the building. So we kept that in mind. And really, the person that we believe and anticipate will be occupying that space is really happy about having that visibility, right? Now you've gone from being back behind the track to being out in the middle and people seeing that your business is right there. It's a real positive space. Seen it in a lot of places like the Caldale Center and Family Leaders Center and Medicine Hat and places, and it's a space that people enjoy to use while they're working out. All right. Maybe some people don't. They get to the back end but yeah. All right. So let's get to the revenues though. Like, don't let me get off track. All right. So here's the revenue. So we've applied all the revenue side of things similar to what we've done with the expense side, where we've assumed some services, assumed some rates and fees, but plugged them in, and we're projecting at this point in time that $606,576.50 is what we project and anticipate an estimate to be for revenues in the facility. I do want to speak to, because some of these numbers may look like for programming, we're not only going to make, that $10,000 may seem small, but we're keeping in track. This is $10,000 over and above. The way I program is when we create a program, we budget for the expenses in and the expenses out, and this is over and above programs being provided. These are the programs provided by the town of Coaldale, not the programs provided by Coaldale Soccer, Minor Soccer Association, football, baseball, things like that. This is just our rec league, so to speak, youth programs, and actually that number grows the more youth programs we do. And we just kept it pretty conservative at this time, not knowing what that number would be, because obviously the first, usually within business plans here, you're looking at allowing space to be occupied and programmed by your community groups first and foremost. Okay? All right. Let's move on to the next. So the estimated cost recovery. The new facility will contribute positively to the operational cost recovery of the department. The facility is projected to grow into complete financial stability with portions of existing salaries included. All right? And I say that confidently because this is something that communities are experiencing a number of different places where this dry sport type of activity, when you're building this space, it's the cheapest to operate. It's not like a pool or an arena where you're struggling to get 50, 60% cost recovery. This is a situation with dry sport where you should be seeing an improvement in your overall cost recovery, and that's certainly what we've had in mind here. Now, having said that, we should be looking at the low-end revenue projections are likely a reality within the first couple of years of operation, because it will take some time with our partners to grow into the space as their programs grow. Keep in mind, we've taken in effect, council's made the comment that don't build something we're going to be grown out of in the future. We've kept that in mind. And there is going to be some growth opportunity for our local groups, and we look forward to them. And so eventually regular users will emerge and increase revenue potential as we continue on here. All right. So I've projected that within the first couple of years, you could look at a deficit of around $70,000. Having said that, as we grow into that space, that possibility of actually improving up over north of $100,000 is a reality. And so the high-end revenue projection provided an idea of future growth potential. Expense projections are not adjusted in this scenario. We'll have some control over those expense scenarios. We will budget our growth with those expenses included as we go. All right. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier that there are some peer comparisons, and actually right from day one on this operational plan, I was using peer comparisons. I was using them and applying them to the space specific that we were building, but certainly a lot of research had gone on with programs offered in other communities, what their rates were, how many people were coming, how many people exist here in Coaldale with the population. And so although it can be difficult to arrive at any exact comparisons of an existing facility operations budgets, because there's a lot of different varying factors involved with that, I am going to provide you a few that I feel comfortable enough. I am waiting for more information, but I'm willing to tell you right here because it's pretty, you likely understand this comment. In the situations where they've built space similar to this that are not a multi-purpose facility that's competing for the same activities all in one space, where they've done P3 agreements and private people have come in to, an example would be Okotoks, where when they built that facility, one of the requirements with that private group was that they had the hard court space for basketball, badminton, volleyball, and things separate from soccer, was because they're able to pull more people in around the clock for that situation. Trying to get a full business plan from a private group is not a simple thing to do. I usually get it in pieces. They're not just willing to offer that information out because there's a number of private entities that operate recreation facilities around the province. And so I am still looking for some information, but let's go with what I do know. And here's what I do know is there is a community that is just over 1,000 people, and I want to point out that population because the population obviously is going to pull into the factor of cost recovery, but that this community, just over 1,000 people, has a facility that is a multi-purpose facility where they have soccer, basketball, volleyball, badminton, pickleball, all played on the same surface. They're able to split it into 2 sections in this said facility. They have some fitness space, some limited fitness space in this facility, and they are right now, this was information that was provided me directly, they are right now looking at a deficit of $151,000 a year at the cost to that community to run this recreation facility, all right? Which again, you have to keep in mind that population base and that draw. And they're competing within 10 minutes of a larger center, very similar, okay? And then you've got a community of just over 14,000, almost 15,000 population. I will note this facility is attached to multi-purpose facility. However, I've extracted that information as best I could do to assume that if it wasn't. And the scenarios between, oh, I thought it came up. The scenarios between these 2 facilities that I really want to point out in differences is that although they're both have the field space designed the same way that soccer's played on the same space that basketball and volleyball and the other sports are, lacrosse. This next scenario has a situation where they have leasable space that they're leasing out, and they're cost recovering with that leasable space with the daycare, an indoor play center, and some and a combatants area where a taekwondo lease is existing. So I just want to show you the difference between the two. This one is looking at $88,780 cost recovery. It actually is experiencing much higher than that, but that's because it can actually use the same, it's using some of the same efficiencies of staff because it's attached to a facility. I pulled that information out to show that if it wasn't attached, the hours that they operate and the staff would be required for that facility. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's the operational plan. I'm going to just pause there for a minute because there might be some questions on the operational side, and then we'll get into the capital budget portion of the meeting.
Open the floor up to council for any questions or of Russell. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Simpson, sorry.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Russ, thank you so much for that portion of that presentation. It's really makes me feel fully confident of your ability to work in that direction. Having a facility in a municipality come up with a surplus or even break even has been in the past a rare occurrence, and I think for some individuals in the community it probably would be something that would be hard to achieve. And I feel that the question that has come forward to me was the revenues and expenses, and obviously you've done due diligence with regards to learning about comparable numbers in your assumptions. And so I guess the question would be, I guess, for the public to understand that these are real numbers, and would you be able to disseminate that kind of information out so that the public feel more confident about that investment into this rec facility?
So right now I'm really only projecting somewhere around a 60% use rate for each one of those spaces that we're doing. What I've done is I've actually taken actual programs, adult recreation leagues to accommodate our own programs. And as you saw with the spontaneous use entry fees to facilities and applying them to specific numbers daily and yearly, that's been done right across the board for rentals, for memberships, for and right from a meeting room rental, and actually those ones were projected much lower than 60%. I don't off the top of my head have that, but certainly looked at other communities of this size with meeting room rentals and how often they were being rented out. Keeping in mind, I stayed conservative but confident in my numbers, because when the high school is attached to this facility and the opportunity between the two of us to bring in certain events, that only increases those, the likelihood of that space being rented out on a greater basis. One might say that the school would likely be using that space for a discounted rate or a free rate. However, having said that, the joint use agreement we have with the school, there's opportunities for us to look at, if that's the case, recovering on some of the expenses. I have not at this time projected janitorial contract carryover from the schools, but the reality is there's opportunities there for partnerships. And so that's why I'm confidently sitting in front of you saying this should generate and will generate revenue for this facility that'll help the overall picture of recreation as we move into the future, because of your work that this group did prior to me getting here and bringing in these partnerships. That is a huge part of what I'm talking about.
So for the membership, the gym would have their own membership fee, and then would they get the running track with the gym? Excuse me.
So we have the opportunity to meet with them. Those details aren't ironed out yet, but there's an opportunity for the two of us to come together and offer a joint membership option to members. At this point in time, I think that it's also important that as part of that, the school is going to want to use the track, it's going to want to use the other space and things like that. It would be a joint option, but an option that would still work for the other entities to be able to use the space. And so I've talked a little bit about that. We'll have an opportunity here, hopefully in the very near future, to start providing more details on what that relationship will look like, because we're really close.
Can you describe with your family memberships for the large families of more than 4 members, how that would work?
Thing that a lot of people in practitioners, recreation practitioners, struggle with. And from what I've heard and what I've experienced myself with having done a couple different options, and the one that stuck is this family membership of 4 is a family membership of 4, and the entire family gets to be attached to that membership. And if the family shows up with 4 of the 6 or 8 people in the family, the 4 people get into the facility for use. If they show up with more than that, the reason why you don't see added memberships there is it's usually and generally cheaper for them to then just pay the additional drop-in fee per family member than to try to tack on other uses or other costs for and them not knowing who's showing up. Having a family of 6, I understand that, and I've operated under this scenario. However, I also am aware that the town of Coaldale has done a good job through this whole process of consulting with the Sport and Rec Working Group. These would be some conversations and information I think would be a good conversation with that group to determine whether or not what worked in Brooks and Calgary is going to work here in Coaldale. Like I said earlier, we need to be adaptable to our community for sure.
Okay, and then Councillor Holm.
Questions for 2 people, so Russ will hit you first. So in your expenses, I don't see anything in here for any expenses for the outside space, as in snow removal from parking lots, et cetera, mowing, doing any of the groundskeeping, flower planting, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm assuming that still is something that needs to be added to the expenditure side of this, because it can amount to a fair chunk of change.
I guess the easy thing for me to say is that's not my department, but no, but we've thought about that, just so you're aware, and it is with the operational staff increase to that facility location. As far as the sidewalks and things go, that's not going to be an issue. It's currently what we're doing with other facilities, and but as far as the parking lot and things go, there are opportunities there again, especially if building with the school. there are going to be opportunities there for a number. I couldn't place a number there and have it be totally realistic, not knowing what that relationship is for the parking lot.
For the layout of this, and I didn't see it in the overlay of it, where's the football field and outside track going to be located? Is it going to be built at the same time as the rec center? And thirdly, will there be entrances and exits from the change rooms directly to the track and the football field if it's going to be used for summertime use during, just go for a run and stuff and not have to come in and out through the main entrance, but is there going to be access from the outside?
Football field and the outdoor track is not in the plans for the rec facility. That was seen as something that would be financed primarily from the school budget. As for the access directly to the fields, that is something that we've given up in the redesign, but it's something that could be incorporated back in to have direct access out. But because the change rooms are they're right adjacent to that main front entrance, we didn't think it would be that cumbersome to utilize that entrance to the change rooms.
Questions? Okay, carry on then.
To Mayor and Council, I'll continue on into the capital portion of the presentation. We'll talk a little bit about the capital budget and how it coincides with the operating budget. Mind you, I've already alluded to that for the most part, but we also have Kyle here who's going to take us through a little bit of the funding for that capital budget to help those that are listening in understand the burden that it won't put on, that there will be no burden put on the taxpayer from this capital portion. So, getting into this, so the capital costs shared previously had not been vetted through cost consultants like they have been at this time. Although the capital expense is higher than was previously anticipated, it's important to understand the following: that the design has been developed with community and partner needs in mind. The existing design is closely related to the projected operating surplus. The cost consultant's pricing is estimated with degrees of variance, and I just want to point out what that is the capital budget for this capital budget, the construction portion of it has a 15% contingency built within that. And as you'll see, we're also looking at building in some other contingencies for council. There's some ways to, if these numbers come back higher than anticipated, which we think at this point in time moving forward in January and February on a tender would put us in the sweet spot and would put us in a good situation for tenders. But should they come back a little higher than anticipated, we want to provide council with some options. And so the tender can be designed with cost-saving line items should council choose to lower the costs. And this scale is just kind of showing that although right now the capital expense, one may look at that and say $13 million is heavy, it's lightened the load on the other side of the scale, right? The operating costs, which is something you're tied in for many, many years. And sure, we could look at diminishing some space and taking some things out, but I just want to point out that with that, likely it will diminish the returns. So less capital cost, the less amenities is basically what you're going to deal with here, and it will diminish returns. And so, last but not least, I just want to point out that the current facility design was arrived at with input from town council, involves stakeholders in the town of Coaldale Sport and Recreation Working Group. The current design will, without a doubt, create a sense of pride for the community as a whole, and Coaldale will stand out from its peers with this building. Administration is confident in projecting an operating plan outlining a full cost recovery of the space as currently designed. And if council so chooses, amenities, line items, can be removed from the tender and prior to the final contract. I do want to make it clear, and I already did within the report, that at this point in time I wouldn't encourage you to start talking about line items because we're not dealing with real numbers yet. I believe going out for the tender is the right stage, and when you have those real numbers, then to start having those conversations. The tender will be designed as such to have those line items separated out for that type of discussion. And with that, I'm going to just turn a little bit of time over to Kyle prior to making the recommendation.
So in looking at the capital cost, the original, excuse me, $10 million, again, just a reminder, that is funded through the annual recreation levy applied to the residential households within Coaldale. In getting to that 13 million number, in adding the 3 million, kind of a little bit of a spoiler alert, some of the capital costs we had, or capital projects ongoing this year, did come under budget. More specific details about those projects will be given to council in November when we do have a budget update. But when we're looking at projects like Main Street, the original budget for that project was estimated around 4.8, 4.9 million. We're projecting to be about 1.2 million under. So that funding is made up of grants such as MSI, capital, and federal gas tax. So part of the additional 3 million would be savings from Main Street. We do look at 8th Street South, and there was a surplus there when we had MSI capital allocated of 110,000. Those grants were needed for that project as that project was under budget. So we're looking at shifting that funding to the rec center. When we did do our budget projection last year, MSI grants for the last, I believe, 2020 and 2021 were kind of an estimate at that time. We did estimate lower, so those grants we're receiving are actually a little higher than we projected. That's about 220 grand as well. So half of the 3 million is essentially funded through grants that from projects that we were under budget or excess funding that we had previously underestimated. The other additional funding would be taken at this time from disposal of kind of the town's land asset bank. That would be approximately 1.5 million. All those numbers together get us about $3 million that we're not taking from existing or reducing other capital projects to fund this. We're just taking this from surpluses that the town has realized through existing projects for 2020. And that gets us to that number, about $13 million that Russ kind of mentioned there. So that's kind of a summary of how we're getting to that for the capital cost. With that, I'll turn it back to you, done, council, for any questions.
Thank you very much, everybody. And with all this, I guess there's still opportunity for sponsorship and partnerships that way. People wanted to come forward and have naming rights or such, and maybe that would be a phase of our project as well. Is that right, Russ?
Yes, through the chair and mayor. That's something that has purposely been left out of this time, but want you to know that certainly we haven't budgeted with that in mind. However, that is an opportunity for some funding. Now, once we have that design set, it makes it a whole lot easier to create that package, and we are looking at it a sponsorship package that we can apply to this facility, but we're also looking at it from a global perspective and not just this project, but a few others as well.
Other questions? So I guess, it's just to clarify again, this number here is a little bit higher in order to accommodate some other partnership opportunities that can assist with the operation of the facility, and it's not purely inflated because of the timing of potential school being co-built. I just wanted to clarify that, and I know Dan already talked about it a little bit, but just doesn't hurt to emphasize.
Yeah, at this time, the cost consultants have made it clear that it is a plus or minus 20%. Having said that, certainly we're looking at being on the low end of that because of the work we've done ahead of time going into it. and there are contingencies built in for sure. The way that Dan actually explained it, I quite liked it in a meeting we had, is that 13 million is our target worst case scenario, right? That's our target. But as we get closer to this project and tendering it out and even working at that point with those real numbers, we're zeroing in more and more on that target. And if the prices, and that's why, is if the costs come back lower than anticipated, a lot of the conversation we would have at this point may not need to happen.
Any additional questions? What? Okay, Dan, go ahead.
To add, in terms of the process, I like to think of the budget as a guided missile where you are constantly correcting the path that as you go through the process. Right now, we're at the very early stages, and we're on target. But as time goes on, we have 2 other pricings, formal pricings from our cost consultant prior to going to tender. And so we will make adjustments as time goes on. As we go through the process, the contingencies are lowered because you're getting more and more accurate information to the cost consultants, and so they feel comfortable in reducing those contingencies. So at this time, we're on budget, but there's plenty of room for us to move through this process and make sure that we continue to be on budget.
Thanks very much for the presentations. Very well done. Gives us an awful lot of information to think about. I'm going to move that we actually go to option 2, which that council refers the decision back to capital budget deliberations. We're going to be starting those deliberations next week. I look at this and say that it's 30% higher than what we approved last year at about this time when we went through capital budget deliberations. And now that you've given us all the information that you have, I think we can come back and make a decision fairly fast. But I do believe that this should go back to budget deliberations, so I move option 2.
Thank you. And so are you done your staff reporting then, or? Okay. Okay, so then we have Councillor Holmes' motion. And option 2 is that council refer the discussion back to the capital budget deliberations of November 2020 prior to making a final decision on the revised scope. Do you want that further in, or period? Just stop at the period, or what? Okay. So that's the motion on the floor. Is there any discussion? I guess I just have a question. Does this, I was looking at it that if we went with option 1, that some work could continue and we'd have more time to get more fulsome numbers for budget deliberations and whatnot, but.
Yeah, through the chair to the mayor, Craig, and you can correct me if I'm wrong though, Dan, but my understanding is it's 3.5 months work needed ahead of tendering going out. And preferably, we'd certainly like to be out by the end of February at the latest to hit that sweet spot. Is that correct?
This is a short delay, so that doesn't present any major challenges, I don't think. Okay. Any other questions? We have a motion for option 2 by Councillor Holm. Call the question. All in favor? Okay, and opposed? Okay, Councillor Pauls. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, and drive safely. Do we need a bit of time to rotate the chairs, I guess? I guess Kalen has to pinch it for Clayton here. Open discussion for item 7.1, no, we're not there. 6.1, bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm presenting the COVID-19 mitigation update slash face covering bylaw on behalf of Clayton Rutberg, our Director of Emergency Management, who got called out before this agenda item. So I am pinch hitting, so I won't take credit for the good work that he and the Emergency Management Advisory Committee did leading up to this presentation. So the purpose of this report is to provide council with the recommendations from the community or the Emergency Advisory Committee about a proposed face covering bylaw for the town of Coaldale. This matter has appeared previously before council. The concept of masking in town facilities, or a mask bylaw, was discussed at the regular council meeting of September 14th, 2020, at which time council did not wish to pursue a mask bylaw at the time. During the regular council meeting of October 13th, 2020, a motion was passed directing the Emergency Advisory Committee to present recommendations on a mask bylaw and a draft mask bylaw for the consideration of council at the regular council meeting of October 26, 2020. COVID-19 continues to be a reality across the world. Recently, there have been an increase in outbreaks not only in neighboring communities, but locally as well. With a spike in cases locally, we must do our part as a community to reduce the spread of COVID-19. The Emergency Advisory Committee held a special meeting to review the draft mask covering bylaw that's being presented before council this evening. The Emergency Advisory Committee was at an impasse as to recommend or not to recommend the approval of the bylaw to council. However, there was a number of helpful insights that emerged regardless of the lack of consensus on whether to recommend the passing of the bylaw. The committee in general wants to ensure the public is safe during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, there was not consensus that implementing a mandatory masking bylaw is the most effective method to ensure public safety. At the recommendation of the Emergency Advisory Committee, the date that this bylaw would take effect has been left blank, as that will be a decision from council. The Emergency Advisory Committee recommends that if council approves the bylaw, that enough time be provided for residents and businesses to ensure that they're aware of the bylaw and so that they can plan for it accordingly. Attached to this report is the draft bylaw, should that be something that council wishes to approve, along with the Emergency Management Committee meeting minutes, also as supplementary information to this report. From a legislative perspective, this is a bylaw that council, if they so choose, could pass in one meeting, provided, however, that unanimous consent be given in order for all three meetings to happen in a meeting. Again, the detail that would need to be inserted into the draft bylaw is the effective date. I'll conclude my overview of this presentation with the three different decision-making options for council to consider. Option 1 is that council approve first and second reading, followed by unanimous consent, and then third reading to approve temporary face covering bylaw 789R-10-20. Option 2 is that council direct the Emergency Advisory Committee and administration to implement changes to the proposed temporary face covering bylaw, and that we would bring that back to council at a subsequent meeting. The third option is that council decline the approval of the temporary face covering bylaw at this time. And that concludes my overview of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, and I believe that Councillor Simpson has gathered up some other information through public engagement, et cetera, through the chamber and herself, so maybe
Yes.
she'd like to share that.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. So on Wednesday, October 21st, I posted on my Facebook page, Brianne Simpson, Town of Coaldale Councillor, a question that states, as a Coaldale resident and or business owner in Coaldale, what do you feel the town should do about a mask bylaw? A, was create a mask bylaw similar to the City of Lethbridge. This is a hard bylaw to enforce. B, create an awareness campaign, have posters available for businesses and public places to be able to post, as well as share information through social media, website, and maybe a mail out. And then C, remain how it is right now. So also on Wednesday, October 14th, 2020, I had an open dialogue meeting with the chamber members that were present regarding a mask bylaw. This is where the option B, an awareness campaign, came from. Also, some businesses were considering implementing that everyone had to wear a mask in their workplace, so employees or customers. Chamber agreed to have a survey regarding this, and results have been forwarded to council. They're not in the report, but their question was, do you think Coaldale should have a temporary mandatory face covering bylaw similar to Lethbridge? Their answers were for yes, was 16 respondents at 22.5%, and no was 55 respondents at 77.4%, so a total of 71% or 71 respondents. I also received responses from comments, direct messages, and through email that was all forwarded to all of council. Any email or message that was generated because of the chamber survey or my Facebook post is included in this report I've sent out today. I have recorded all comments beyond just stating what they were voting for in the comment section in my Facebook post. So just remember that this is a poll for information. I cannot guarantee that all the people that voted are residents of Coaldale. In fact, a couple stated otherwise. This is just a poll for general information. As of when I closed the poll this morning, there was 7,307 people that had viewed the post. A total of 787 comments were received, but I responded to each answer, and there was some conversations that occurred. There was 21 shares of this post, and I couldn't see them all, and do not know if people responded to some of the shares, because you would have had to click on my post to be able to, for me to be able to see. So the results are A, which was to create the mask bylaw, was 31 respondents. B, which was to create an awareness campaign, was 17. And C, which remain how it is right now, was 304 respondents. I think a lot of people gave there was a lot of comments in the sections, and it filled up quite a few pages, as well as the emails, and there was a lot of insightful links that were included in some of these. So it's been quite interesting to hear some of the responses and read a lot of the information given.
Is there any other members of council that want to comment? Councillor Lloyd?
I'd like to thank all the people that responded. It definitely sounds like it's resounding that they don't want this. So I would be prepared to, I would support the number 3, that council decline the approval of the temporary mask covering, face coverings.
So that's your motion?
Sure, I can make a motion.
Okay. Well, I'm not trying to start one out on you, but I just wanted to clarify. So Councillor Lloyd makes a motion for option number 3, that council decline the approval of the temporary face mask covering bylaw. And I'll open it up for questions. Is there any questions or comments? Councillor Holm, and then Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Oh, you gotta do it again. There you go.
Thank you, Your Worship. Speaking against the motion, I thank Councillor Simpson for taking the time to do her Facebook post and her information there, and for the chamber to put theirs on. I agree that there is a lot of people that certainly don't like face masks for whatever reasons, but I certainly would like to follow the advice of our head medical officer in the province of Alberta, our Canadian health advisor, or doctor, who all basically state that masks will protect both yourself and others during this pandemic. So for me, I'll get over it. I'll wear a mask because I want to make sure that not just myself is safe, but my mother is safe, and others who I may come in contact with are safe. And I'll take the advice of the medical doctors over others.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you also to Councillor Simpson as well for your your focus on this, and the responses certainly are overwhelming, and how you responded to each and every one is really shows that you care about the matter as well. I'm speaking in favor of the motion, and to that, I also support the Emergency Advisory Committee's communication strategy, and they've kind of set out some bullet points which I think that they should continue to communicate with our community, to provide advance notice to the community, to provide signage with pictures that clearly show that masks need to be worn in the town, to provide information on wearing masks properly, and to provide the community information on knowing that COVID-19 cases here in Coaldale. So not that that has to be part of the motion, but I think that could be a strategy that they could incorporate moving forward.
Okay, and then Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. Speaking not in favor of the motion, and being in the healthcare profession, you know, I read through all of the comments and that Councillor Simpson got, and I also commend her on answering each and every one of them. But we also have to think, when I wear a mask, I'm protecting you. When you wear a mask, you're protecting me. So if I have the respect to protect you, you should have the respect to protect me back. But I don't know if a bylaw is the way of doing this, or if it's just, as Councillor Chapman said, it's public awareness, putting signs on the store doors, and maybe town can look at helping out with providing masks, because we've got no way to enforce a bylaw. You go into Lethbridge, they've got a bylaw, and there's several individuals, whether you go into a store, they don't wear a mask, and that's their prerogative. Every human has a right, but I also have a right. And so I don't know if a bylaw is the way of doing it. Like I say, there's no way of enforcing it. So you're kind of putting out a false hope the town has a bylaw. So maybe there's other ways of doing it, and that's public education. But I will not vote in favor of not having something in place for our residents' safety. You know, and I do also respect that, you know, 86% of the respondents to Councillor Simpson's survey said we shouldn't have a bylaw, but would they be objective to having safety measures in place to protect them from the COVID?
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I did, because I'm not in the healthcare profession, and I did a lot of studying on both sides of it. Why would we have a mask bylaw and why we wouldn't? And there's a lot of interesting facts that came up on both sides. When I'm in Lethbridge right now, it is a hot topic about the mask bylaw, but I find people do not give me my 6 feet distance. And I don't know why the cases are rising after the mask bylaw went into effect there. But I truly believe we really need to focus on that 6 feet apart more than wearing a mask, because it doesn't always show. There's places, there's other cities that have not put the mask bylaw in, and their numbers are still low. So I think it's that reminding the residents, yes, you can wear a mask, but if you so choose, but also I think it's very important that we give out something to businesses about advertising and reminding residents to stay 6 feet apart.
Discussion around the room, because it would be ironic if there wasn't mixed thoughts on this, because that's what you see in the real world. And you know, I, like everybody else, am in a bit of a bad place, because you know, I see both sides and whatnot, and you know, I reading through the different emails and responses, people are saying that they appreciate the fact of not trying to do any more harm to businesses and whatnot. And I know that, you know, some people are so strongly against mask wearing that they choose to go to businesses and that, you know, accommodate that and whatnot, but you know, and I think that, you know, this like I think to myself, you know, I question myself, well, you know, like Roger says, like the chief medical officer of health and whatnot, you know, then if it's, I would totally respect if our chief medical officer of health said, you know, henceforth, here's the mask bylaw to be applied type thing. And, you know, I would really feel a lot better if those more educated bodies put some work into something like that. Because when I'm looking at our bylaw, which I have no, you know, I really appreciate our staff, the time that they put into it, but, you know, I have questions like, you know, a temporary bylaw. Like, I think, you know, to me, you know, what does that mean exactly? I know they're saying, okay, a temporary bylaw, you insert a date when it starts to have that education process, but, you know, under what parameters does it make sense? Like, you know, do you have, you know, whatever factor of coronavirus infections happening, do you kick in the bylaw, and then when you go below that threshold, does the bylaw not be applicable type thing? And, you know, those are, I think it should be scientific in the sense that, you know, rather than a broad stroke, and I don't fault our people for not, you know, doing that, because, I mean, it is a complicated issue, and, you know, I think it, you know, these kind of things, like, you know, I really admire, I think, you know, one of the things, the underpinnings of the marketplace is that businesses can react really to these things. You know, if a business in Coaldale has good high traffic customer volume, then they could, you know, I would hope that they're being proactive and saying, hey, you know what, we have really strong volume in our store, and people are finding it hard to social distance, so we're gonna henceforth ask everybody to wear masks, and that could be their own undertaking. So, and I agree, you know, going from what other people have said, if we don't have this, then we need to, you know, figure out a way to, you know, proactively communicate to the public, and you know, have a system of advisories and whatnot that, you know, is recommended or whatnot. And I guess further, you know, before I yield the mic, I would just suggest that with the group, you know, the volunteer group that we have, the advisory committee, you know, I really applaud them for their work on it. And I would just suggest that maybe for, you know, in times of pandemic and that, we might include the membership of that to extend to our local doctors, because, you know, I believe that those members are absent from this advisory committee, and they could be quite valuable in informing, you know, whether it's a good idea or whatnot, or when it's a good time to have such a bylaw. So I'll yield the floor to Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. I concur completely with all your comments, Your Worship, and again, just a big thank you to the Chamber, who also did some due diligence, and their community, including the business community, have certainly raised the bar in terms of how they've addressed this whole matter. And, you know, you go into various stores and businesses, and they've got all the protocols in place. So it's up to individuals really to show responsibility and respect for their actions and how they conduct themselves in public places. I believe that our arena already has protocols for controlling and for taking measures for wearing masks and such. Our churches as well are really taking that quite diligently. So I support your idea that maybe in the future we should include the medical community on our advisory committee, and so, but I'll close my thoughts with that.
Clayton here, he was involved in the formation of some of this report. Our CAO did a good job on delivering your report in your absence. You were well represented, but, you know, if you heard some of the comments or whatnot around the room, not all of them maybe, but some, just give you an opportunity to weigh in on any of this if you like.
I think really the only thing I'd weigh in on is just the fact that I think the same discussion happened around the Emergency Advisory Committee with the members that were on that committee. Very similar discussion, you know, kind of weighing it back and forth, which is why there was really no recommendation necessarily to, implement a bylaw. More so they wanted something to come forward in case council wished to implement one. But really they stressed that communication piece, that we keep doing that key communication and key messaging back out to the public to help limit the spread. So I think just echoing the fact that there was very similar discussion. I did get to hear a little bit of it in the other room at the Emergency Advisory Committee level as well.
Or Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's important to notice that Dr. Hinshaw recommendations are to wear a mask when 6 feet distance cannot be obtained, and all her other recommendations. I know only 17 respondents on here talked about the awareness campaign, but I know there's posters available through the provincial and the federal governments, and I think it's maybe something that we kind of package up if we have enough staff time, just to kind of package out to send to the chamber and to the businesses within Coaldale, and maybe just continue making notices about it on our social media. And I was wondering if Councillor Lloyd would amend her motion to include that.
Lloyd, the ball's in your court. Councillor Simpson is asking if you, in addition to declining the bylaw, that you would add that engage in a citizen awareness program and with appropriate materials to be distributed. Is that more or less what your wording might be?
More or less, yeah, because I think there's a lot already on the internet about it. If we just pull it off and package it for our businesses to be able to put posters in their front doors and just add a little bit more to our social media.
Did you want to consider that as friendly, or do you want your motion to stand the way it is?
No, I think it's a very good idea. It's definitely a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, and then Councillor Chapman?
Worship, just through to Councillor Simpson, the communication strategy that the advisory committee would also help to have that included, do you think, in that communique?
Whichever way administration would like to take it, if it's the advisory committee, or I think it's an easy probably package up through the internet to send out. Myself, that's, there's a lot of information there. It's just sometimes it's easier to give it to the businesses than for them to have to find it themselves.
To be a hog, but I will be, but I was just wondering if there is any wisdom at all in having a bylaw in, kind of draft form in case there is the need to, heaven forbid that it, things continue to decline and whatnot, but would there be any instance where you could see, or where you're more engaged in this, either Clayton or I'll even open it up to Councillor Avery, if in your work lives, do you see that, something like that might be a way to go if things continue to deteriorate, to have this draft bylaw kind of, or some version of it ready to go quickly?
It never hurts to be prepared in the event that something does change or opinions change, that something like that would need to be implemented. So I don't think it hurts to, again, have that sitting in your back pocket type of thing, to be able to implement, with little to no notice, and move a little bit quicker.
You're good.
And I go back to the bylaw and the enforcement of it. So if things do continue to worsen, I think as municipalities, that pressure should be put on the province to put in the law or the mandate for masks, because it's a lot easier to implement as a law coming from the province than it is from a bylaw coming from a municipality. As I said, when you go to Lethbridge, they've had a bylaw for quite some time. Those that want to wear them will wear them, and I thank them for that, but those that don't want to wear them, they don't wear them. So again, I think we need to, as Clayton says, it doesn't hurt to have a bylaw, but I think we should also be pushing provincially if the cases keep escalating each day like they are, that they need to, rather than shutting down, implement the practices that they recommend of the 6 feet distancing and masks, because the spread rate, if you have a mask and you're 6 feet away, is less than 0.005%. If you're in direct contact with a positive case. So, you know, I'll take that chance rather than 6 feet away and having a 50 or 60% chance of contracting.
Good discussion. Is any more? Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. The one question I have, is there, I know this is probably a far reach, is there any way to ask provincial government that we could have Coaldale numbers? That's one thing that had been brought up lots, and it's one thing that's asked for me lots. Is there any way we can actually know our active cases within the town instead of being considered in the county of Lethbridge?
Aware of, and with Councillor Avery shaking his head no. I was going to ask if he had any other insight from his professional background as well, but not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right, so that, unless I see any more hands or whatnot, we have the motion by Councillor Lloyd that council decline the approval of the temporary face mask covering bylaw 789R 1020, and further that the administration, that the town engage in a public awareness program to disseminate information to local businesses and residents using the readily available materials on the various websites. Right? Is that right, Councillor Lloyd? Oh, good. Okay. Good. All right, so we have that motion, and barring any further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and we have 6, and then opposed. Councillor Holm, thank you very much. Like Councillor Avery mentioned, that might be a letter to the province, maybe ask for separate reporting for Coaldale and encourage them to contemplate a provincial regulation that could be enforceable. Do we want to go that way or not? Councillor Lloyd?
I'm okay with, thank you, Your Worship. I'm okay with finding numbers for Coaldale, but I don't think that we should encourage the province to make rules for us. We can, I would prefer to have local autonomy in that area.
Further, I'll move on from 6.1 then. And we'll have 7.1. I believe we have a cohort ready to step in on Night of Lights, and Cindy Hoffman will be forward shortly.
The following report is to provide council with information on the planning of the Country Christmas Night of Lights Parade event during the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and knowing that physical distancing and other AHS requirements for the prevention and/or reduction of transmission of the virus will be in effect by November 20th, the Country Christmas Night of Lights is unable to be carried out as per normal while considering the safety of our community. The AHS South Zone is also currently seeing substantial increase in the number of COVID cases and has been placed under watch status at this time. In consultation with Coaldale Emergency Services Team, the Emergency Management Team, and RCMP, it has been determined that in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and the rising number of confirmed COVID cases in the AHS South Zone and County of Lethbridge, the Community Services Department will not be planning or hosting the annual Country Christmas Night of Lights parade this year. Several options for a modified event were discussed. However, the inherent risk to our community associated with each option was found to be too great. The safety of everyone in the community was the paramount factor in this very difficult decision. In lieu of the Night of Lights event, however, Community Services will continue to host the 3rd annual Fan Favorite Best Decorated Business Competition as decided by the community, and the 2nd annual Best Decorated Business Competition as decided by our local judges. So we are hoping to support our local businesses by asking the community to go out and check decorations, their businesses during the week of November 16th, and then vote on their favorite business. So like I said, we'll be inviting all Coaldale businesses to go all out this year with decorating the inside and outside of their businesses. And then we will ask community members to go down and support them, and while there, check out their decorations. Our local judges will be judging the outside decorations of our businesses on Sunday, December 13th, and will determine the winner of the Best Decorated Business Award. We will also be holding the 2nd annual Best Decorated Holiday Home and Yard Competition. So every decorated home in Coaldale will be judged on Sunday, December 13th. And then from that, a self-guided Coaldale Country Christmas Night of Lights tour map will again be provided online so that families are able to enjoy the holiday light displays throughout Coaldale while in the safety of their own vehicles and cohorts. Finally, the 2nd annual Winter Light Festival will run from November 21st to January 9th at the picnic shelter. The theme this year is Awaken the Winter Spirit, and the park will again be open to the public each Wednesday and Saturday evening, ensuring COVID guidelines are followed. So we're hoping, we're trying our best to ensure the community spirit for Christmas is alive and well, even though we are not able to gather for a parade. So like in consultation with Emergency Services, Emergency Management, RCMP, and Community Services, we would like to ask Council if they would consider canceling the Night of Lights event for November 2020.
Councillor Lloyd?
The options, well, thank you, Your Worship. Was one of the options having a drive-by parade, whereas the parade would stand still and people could drive by?
Yes, correct.
'Cause I always enjoy just going around to the hospital where they're all parked and just looking at them all. Is that an option that can be looked at?
We did talk about that one. That was actually the first option that I had come up with, and there were some concerns about traffic safety, so that was the issue with that.
Councillor Chapman?
Thank you so much, Cindy, for all your hard work on all these little projects and working with the chamber and working with the community at large to try to come up with some sort of ideas for this winter. So I'll move that council cancel the Night of Lights event for November 2020, and further that Community Services continue to proceed with your 4 events, which would be the business, let me see here, the Fan Favorite Best Decorated Business, the annual Best Decorated Business Competition, both competitions, and of course the annual Best Decorated Holiday Home and Yard Competition, and of course the highlight for you is, well, the annual Winter Light Festival. So.
Okay, we have that motion by Councillor Chapman. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Yeah, that's carried unanimously. With our thanks, Cindy.
Thank you, Council.
And then item 7.3, we, with the kind of problems that we're encountering with our live stream equipment and that, I think it'd be worthwhile to address the administration, examine what we can do to improve our ability to carry on with the live stream and come out with a report on what upgrades, if any, are necessary. Kyle?
That about a month ago at our previous IT meeting, or meeting with our IT contractors, we did discuss actually replacing the live streaming equipment. So they're currently in the process of getting us some quotes for that. We did plan to bring that to council as part of the 2021 budget discussions. Currently, we have approximately $20,000 left in our IT budget for the year. We do have some equipment we need to replace before the end of the year, but what we could do is try to speed that process up, replace the equipment this year, keep it within budget as much as we can, and possibly fund any overages through our IT equipment reserve if required. That would kind of be the direction we would need to, from council, to get that moving as quickly as possible, rather than waiting till 2021 to purchase the new equipment.
So then you just need direction to bring that forward to our budget deliberations then?
Should we want to go ahead and replace this in a more timely fashion, it would just be, we would try to replace it within the current budget we have remaining of 20 grand. But if there is any overages, maybe say 5,000 or whatnot, that we would have ability to fund that through our IT reserve. It would essentially just be moving expenses up 2 months.
So then I'm hearing that work could be done already then. Okay.
It would just help expedite the process too for council.
Because it is important, and we don't know how long we're going to be in this position of social distancing kind of environment. And I think that we also, with the current equipment, have some shortfall or inadequacies in being able to switch back into live stream once we're done our closed session meetings and whatnot. So I think if we could enhance everything so we have a better, more efficient way to engage live streaming after our closed sessions, so we can, provide that transparency to the public, that would be awesome.
So I don't need a motion from council, but just consider when we come to year end, if we do have a little bit of a deficit in that account, we'll just fund it through reserve when we get there.
Okay, so a motion to receive that item for information would be sufficient. Does anybody care to make that motion? Councilor Simpson, any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you for your insight, Kyle. And we are down into information items, 11.1 and 11.2. Maybe administration, do you want to talk about the 11.2? Any comments with regard to that? How do you think they speak for themselves? Are they up on the website, and are they being okay? Councilor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think for the sake of the public, I think we need to outline it. I think it would be nice if administration could give an overview of what it's all about.
Oh. Oh. Okay.
For the sake of the public, I think it would be good for administration to outline and give a brief overview of, I think it's something that's really important, and we should let everybody know about it.
Kellen, would you just hit the highlights on it, or add in that information then?
Certainly.
This is part of Toastmasters training, your table topics and discussion.
This is what they call the impromptu speech.
Yes.
Well, every year we receive a letter from the province of Alberta indicating how we measure up based on the 13 specific criteria that they use to measure risk in all municipalities throughout the province of Alberta. This is the primary litmus test that they use to determine the viability of different municipalities in the province, because it's in their best interest that municipalities are viable. Otherwise, it creates problems for them where they have to actually initiate an intervention. So in the information that's here, what we've done is include the guidelines or the criteria that they use, the 13 different criteria, the definitions of the criteria, as well as how they're applied to each of the municipalities. So there's a package there that explains what metrics they utilize. And then also what we did is we typed in Coaldale. If anyone goes to the website, they can type in any municipality in the province of Alberta if they're curious to see how they're doing in each of the areas. So the punchline in terms of Coaldale is that we didn't trigger any of the 13 indicators for concern that the province uses to measure risk. The audit outcome is from the province is that there is no concern, no intervention, and then they have the punchline for each of the key areas. Briefly, tax-based balance is one, our tax collection rate, population change, current ratio, the accumulated surplus, whether financial reporting occurs on time or not, debt to revenue percentage, debt service to revenue percentage, investment in infrastructure, infrastructure age, interest in municipal office. So just to rattle them off, but the booklet that is contained in the agenda includes the official criteria set out by the province that they've evaluated us on. So this, I think a couple meetings ago, we had the results from the 2018 that we discussed. We also received last week the ones for the 2019 fiscal year. And then as soon as year end's done for the 2020 fiscal year and we submit that before the deadline of next April, then they begin their evaluation process, and it just continues on an annual basis.
Oh, what's your will with the information items, Council? We have the two items, so. Councillor Holm. Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Lloyd?
Just, thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to have some way of letting the public know if we put this particular thing in the paper or in our newsletter, or just so we can have people know that we did really well and there is no areas of concern.
All right. Call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. I think that could be handled administratively on the social media communication piece. Good. All right. I think we have exhausted the open session parts of the meeting. Do we want to conclude this regular meeting and then go to the organization? Okay, good. So I'll call for a motion to go into closed session then. Councillor Holm, all in favor? Yeah, it's carried.